My name is Mabel Hemsworth. I'm 73 years old, and I heard my daughter-in-law whisper to my son that she wondered why I was still alive at his 45th birthday party. So I smiled, served them my famous peach cobbler, and then spent the next 6 weeks quietly and methodically erasing them from every corner of my life. I know that sounds harsh, but I hope you'll stick with me for a bit and hear me out. I'm telling this story because I have a feeling there are others out there who might understand, who have felt that slow, creeping chill of being taken for granted. I'm sitting here in my new apartment in sunny Florida, and it's about 8 a.m. The coffee is brewing. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. It feels a little less lonely knowing someone somewhere is listening. The day it all happened started out like any other Saturday in June. The air in my North Carolina home was thick and sweet with the smell of honeysuckle and freshly cut grass. I'd spent the morning in my kitchen, the same kitchen I'd cooked in for 50 years, its linoleum floor worn smooth and a path from the stove to the sink. I was carefully peeling a mountain of fresh peaches, the fuzzy skins coming away in perfect strips under my practiced thumb. The juice ran down my wrists, sticky and sweet. My husband, Frank, God rest his soul, always said my peach cobbler was the eighth wonder of the world. He was a biased man, but a good one. He's been gone 5 years now, and the house, our house, often felt cavernous and too quiet without his cheerful whistling. That's why I always look forward to family gatherings. Or at least I used to. My son, Carl, was turning 45. He and his wife, Jody, were hosting a big barbecue in the backyard of the house I'd helped them buy. I remember the day they closed on it vividly. I sat next to them at a long, polished table, my bank book in my purse. I just signed the check for the $40,000 down payment. It was a huge chunk of my savings, the money Frank and I had earmarked for a cruise down the Danube River. But Carl had come to me, his face a mask of worry, talking about interest rates and giving his kids, my grandchildren, Ruby and Trent, a stable home with a yard. "It's for the kids, Mom," he'd said, his voice earnest, "so they can have the kind of childhood I had." How could I say no to that? Jody had hugged me so tight I could barely breathe, her perfume cloying and sweet. "You're a lifesaver, Mabel, a true lifesaver." I chose to believe her. It was easier that way. When I pulled my old, reliable Buick into their driveway, a party was in full swing. Music I didn't recognize was thumping from a speaker on the deck, and a dozen cars were parked along the curb. I balanced the warm dish of cobbler, its top a perfect golden brown, in my hands, and walked around the side of the house. The gate was propped open with a rock. No one saw me approach. They were all gathered on the expansive deck, the one I'd paid for as a housewarming gift. Carl at his gleaming stainless steel grill, and Jody flitting between guests with a pitcher of what looked like sangria. I stopped behind a large lilac bush that Frank and I had given them, just for a moment to catch my breath and smooth down the front of my favorite floral dress. That's when I heard it. Jody's voice, low and sharp, designed to carry to Carl, but not to her guests. "Did you see what she's wearing? That same old flowery dress? Honestly, Carl." I felt a familiar, dull ache. She'd made comments like that for years. "It's fine, Joe. Just leave it," Carl mumbled, his back to her as he expertly flipped a row of burgers. "It's not fine," she hissed, her voice dropping lower, more venomous. "My boss is here. His wife is wearing a designer sundress. It's embarrassing. And why does she even bother coming to these things? She just sits in a corner and looks sad." There was a pause. I held my breath. And then came the words that would shatter the foundation of my world. "Why is she even still alive? Our lives would be so much simpler." The world went silent. The music, the laughter, the sizzle of the grill, it all faded into a dull roar in my ears. The heavy ceramic dish in my hand suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. My heart didn't just break, it felt like it had been scooped out of my chest with a rusty spoon. Simpler. My existence, the inconvenience of my continued breathing, stood in the way of their simpler life. My breath, the life that Frank and I had built, the life that had brought Carl into this world, was a problem to be solved. For a long, terrifying moment, my vision blurred. I thought about turning around, getting back in my car, and driving away forever. I thought about marching onto that deck and shattering the cobbler dish at their feet, letting the sweet, sticky peaches splatter across Jody's pristine white capri pants. But then a strange, cold calm washed over me. It was the same calm I felt when the doctor told me Frank wasn't going to make it through the night. It was the calm of a terrible, undeniable truth. There was no going back from this. I took a deep breath, the scent of lilacs filling my lungs. I smoothed my dress again, lifted my chin, and stepped out from behind the bush with the brightest, emptiest smile I could muster. "Smells wonderful," I chirped, my voice sounding unnaturally high. I placed the cobbler on the crowded picnic table, right next to a store-bought potato salad. Jody turned, her face a perfect mask of delighted surprise. "Mabel, we didn't see you there. You're a sneaky one." She gave me one of her air kisses that never quite landed on my cheek. Carl gave me a quick, distracted nod before turning back to the grill. "Don't burn the burgers, honey," Jody called to him. My grandchildren, 16-year-old Ruby and 14-year-old Trent, didn't even look up from their phones. I was a ghost at my own son's party, a ghost who brought dessert. I spent the next hour making small talk with people I didn't know, my smile feeling like it was cracking my face. I watched Jody laugh and hold court, watched Carl brag about a promotion at his firm, a promotion that allowed them to afford their new SUV. I watched my grandchildren ignore me. And with every passing minute, the cold calm inside me grew harder, solidifying from ice into steel. I left without much of a goodbye. As I drove home down the familiar roads, the memory of Jody's words played on a loop, and other memories started to surface, connecting like dots in a horrifying picture. The canceled trip to see my sister in Arizona because Jody had a work emergency, the way they'd borrowed my late husband's prized watch and never returned it, the casual way they discussed my house, their future inheritance, as if I were already gone. When I got back to my empty house, I didn't cry. The time for tears was over. I walked into Frank's old office, sat down at his big oak desk, and looked at a photo of us on our wedding day. "Well, Frank," I whispered to the smiling picture, "you always said I was too soft on him. You said I'd do anything to avoid a conflict. I think it's time I learned to be hard." That night, I didn't sleep. I made a pot of coffee and a list. It was a very different kind of list than my usual groceries or chores. It was a list of everything I had given them. The down payment, the deck, the thousands of hours of free childcare, the college funds I'd started. And next to it, I started a new one, a list of everything I was about to take back. The Monday morning after the barbecue felt different. The sun streamed through my kitchen window just like it always did, but the world seemed sharper, more defined. The fog of passive acceptance I'd been living in for years had finally burned away. My first move, I decided, had to be figuring out my financial situation. I was a child of the Depression era. You trusted your family and your local bank manager, and that was about it. My knowledge of trusts and estates came from old movies. My first stop was the branch of the local bank where Frank and I had kept our accounts for 40 years. I thought if I explained my situation, they could offer some guidance. I put on a nice blouse and my good cardigan and sat down opposite a young man named Kevin, whose name tag was crooked. He couldn't have been more than 25, with a slick haircut and an impatient tap-tap-tapping of his pen on his desk as he reviewed my file on his computer screen. I tried to explain my concerns in a vague way, feeling a ridiculous sense of shame, as if I were the one doing something wrong. "I'm getting older, you see," I started, my voice sounding frail even to my own ears. "And I want to make sure my assets are protected for my future." Kevin gave me a condescending smile, the kind you'd give a confused child. "Of course, Mrs. Hemsworth. It's very wise to plan. Let's see here. You have an excellent record with us. I see your son, Carl, is already a joint holder on your main checking and savings accounts. That's perfect. Most of our senior clients do that for ease of access in an emergency. You're all set. But what if I want to change that? I asked, leaning forward. What if I want to be the only one with access? He blinked, the tapping stopping for a second. His smile tightened. Well, you could do that, but it's a bit unusual. It requires filling out several forms, and since Mr. Hemsworth is a joint account holder, he'd actually have to sign off on his own removal. Is there a problem? Usually these arrangements are based on family trust. Trust. The word hung in the air between us like a bad smell. He was talking to me like I was a confused old woman who didn't understand how the world worked. Then he leaned forward conspiratorially. Actually, Mrs. Hemsworth, we have a new Senior Shield investment plan. We could roll your assets into that. It has a great return, and we could even set it up so Carl, as your designated agent, could manage it for you. It would really simplify things. Simplify. There it was again. The third time in as many days. I felt a cold fury rise within me. He wasn't trying to help me. He was trying to sell me a product that would give my son even more control. He saw me as a mark, not a customer. No, thank you, Kevin, I said up abruptly. I don't think you can help me. I walked out of that bank with my head held high, but my hands were shaking. The system was built to make people like me feel powerless. Kevin's dismissive attitude was the second insult that weekend, and it fanned the flames inside me. I couldn't do this the easy way. I needed a weapon. I needed someone who saw me not as a dotty old lady, but as a client. That evening, I called Sarah. Sarah and I have been friends for over 60 years. We met in kindergarten and have seen each other through first loves, marriages, births, and deaths. She was the only person on earth I could tell the absolute truth to without fear of judgment. He said what? Sarah's voice crackled over the phone. I could picture her in her armchair, her knitting needles frozen mid-stitch. No, not Carl, I corrected her, my voice flat. It was Jody that did. Carl just stood there and let her. I told her everything. The words at the party, the years of small slights, the humiliating visit to the bank. When I was done, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. I thought we'd been disconnected. Mabel, she said finally, her voice grim. That conniving little witch. I never liked her. And Carl, he's got no backbone, never has. She took a deep breath. My cousin Eleanor went through a terrible divorce a few years back. Her husband, that cheat, tried to hide all their assets offshore. It was a mess. The first lawyer she hired was useless. Then she found this woman, not a regular lawyer at first, but some kind of independent consultant. A real bulldog, Eleanor called her. What kind of consultant? I asked, my pen hovering over the notepad on Frank's desk. A specialist in estates and, what's the word? Forensic accounting, I think? She digs through everything. She helps people, usually widows or divorcees, who are being taken advantage of by their own families. Her name is Lena Petrova. She's expensive, Eleanor said, but she's worth every single penny. She doesn't take crap from anyone. A bulldog. The word resonated with me. I didn't need a kitten. I needed a bulldog. I got Lena's number from Sarah. My hand trembled as I wrote it down. This was it. This was the first real step into a world I knew nothing about. The next day, I sat in my car for 10 minutes in the parking lot of a small, unassuming office building before I could bring myself to go inside. Lena Petrova's office was on the second floor. It was neat, organized, and decorated in cool shades of gray and blue. There was nothing personal on the walls, just a few abstract prints. Lena herself was a woman in her late 50s with sharp, intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense haircut. She wore a tailored pantsuit and didn't smile when she shook my hand. She just gestured for me to sit. Sarah called ahead, Lena said, her voice direct. She gave me the broad strokes. Tell me in your own words what you want to achieve. There was something about her directness that put me at ease. She wasn't pitying me or humoring me. She was treating me like a serious person with a serious problem. So I told her. I told her everything, starting with the whisper behind the lilac bush and ending with the condescending banker. I didn't cry. My voice was even and steady. When I finished, she steepled her fingers and looked at me, her expression unreadable. "All right, Mabel," she said. "Here's what I see. You've been the family bank, the unpaid nanny, and the emotional punching bag. They've systematically stripped you of your assets and your dignity, all under the guise of love and family duty. Your son has power of attorney, I presume?" I nodded, ashamed. Frank and I had signed the papers years ago, thinking it was the responsible thing to do. "He's a joint on your accounts. Your house is likely in your name, but they live as if it's already theirs. Your will probably leaves everything to him. Am I close?" I just nodded again, my throat tight. She had laid out the architecture of my own prison in less than 30 seconds. "Good," she said, though it didn't sound good at all. "It means the structure is clear, and any structure can be dismantled. This will be a war, Mabel. It will be fought quietly, with paperwork and lawyers, but it's a war nonetheless. They will fight back when they realize what's happening. They will try to make you feel guilty. They will question your sanity. Are you prepared for that?" I looked into her sharp, unwavering eyes. I thought of Jody's whisper. I thought of the dismissive look on Kevin's face. I thought of Frank's warning all those years ago. "Yes," I said, my voice clear and strong. "I am." For the first time, a small, thin smile touched Lena's lips. "Excellent," she said, pulling a fresh legal pad toward her. "Let's get to work." Lena was a whirlwind of efficiency. Within an hour, she had scheduled an appointment for me with an estate lawyer she trusted implicitly, a man named Arthur Davies. "Arthur is methodical and unflappable," she had said, looking up from her calendar. "He specializes in contentious estates, which is what this is about to become. He'll protect you from any legal shenanigans Jody and her kind might try to pull." 2 days later, I was sitting in Mr. Davies's plush office. It was the opposite of Lena's, filled with dark wood, leather-bound books, and framed photos of his smiling family. He was a kind-faced man in his 60s, with a full head of white hair and gentle eyes. But when he spoke about the law, his voice was pure steel. He had a way of explaining complex ideas in simple, reassuring terms. "Mrs. Hemsworth," he began, after his assistant brought in a tray with tea and biscuits, "Lena has briefed me. The first order of business, and the most urgent, is the durable power of attorney. It gives your son immense control over your finances and medical decisions. We need to revoke it. It's a simple form, but we must send a certified letter to your son informing him of the change. It will be the first shot fired across the bow. Are you ready for that?" "He won't know until he receives the letter?" I asked, my teacup rattling slightly in its saucer. "Correct. By the time he gets it, we'll have the other pieces in motion. He will have no power to stop them." I signed the revocation document. My hand was steady this time. Each stroke of the pen felt like laying a brick in the wall of my new fortress. Next, we tackled the will. My old will was painfully simple. Everything went to Carl. If he were to pass, it would be split between Ruby and Trent. "I want to change it completely," I said. My voice didn't waver. "I want to leave a small, protected educational trust for my grandchildren, a college fund that they can't access until they're 21, and I want to make it ironclad so their parents cannot touch a single dime of it." "A wise provision," Mr. Davies said, making detailed notes on a yellow legal pad. "And the remainder of the estate?" "The remainder, I want it to go somewhere else." My voice was firm. "Very well. Now, the house," he said, looking at me over his spectacles. "It's your most significant asset."
The house is the most important part, I said, thinking of the 50 years of memories soaked into its walls, the good, the bad, and the heartbreaking. That's when Lena, who was also in the meeting, proposed the idea of an irrevocable trust. It sounded intimidating, but the way she explained it was simple. I would transfer the deed of the house into this legal entity. I could live in it for the rest of my life, but legally, it wouldn't be my property anymore. It couldn't be touched by creditors, it couldn't be used to pay for long-term care, and most importantly, it couldn't be claimed as part of my inheritance. I would name a beneficiary for after I passed. "Who do you want to be the beneficiary, Mabel?" Lena asked, gently. An idea, one that had been dormant for decades, suddenly sparked in my mind. It was a memory from a time long before Carl was born, when Frank and I were young, broke, and struggling. There was a week when his first small business venture failed spectacularly, and we were evicted from our tiny apartment. We had nowhere to go. A local women's shelter, the Elm Street Haven, took me in while he slept on a friend's couch. They gave me a clean bed, hot meals, and the kindness I needed to keep going. We were back on our feet a week later, but I never, ever forgot it. "The Elm Street Haven," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I want the proceeds from the sale of my house to go to them." Mr. Davies looked at me over his glasses, a flicker of deep respect in his eyes. "A noble choice, Mrs. Hemsworth," he said. "We can certainly make that happen." I walked out of that office feeling taller than I had in years. The weight on my shoulders was beginning to lift. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was a benefactor. The next front in our silent war was the bank. Armed with the knowledge from Lana, I didn't go back to see the patronizing Kevin. I opened a new set of accounts at a completely different bank, a national one with a downtown branch. The woman who helped me, named Maria, was professional and respectful. She called me Mrs. Hemsworth and didn't ask a single prying question. Over the next week, I systematically began to transfer my funds over, my pension deposits, my Social Security, the savings I had squirreled away. I left only a few $100s in the joint account I shared with Carl. It would be an early warning system. The moment he tried to pull money from it and couldn't, I'd know they were getting suspicious. One afternoon, while sorting through old paperwork for Mr. Davies, I found something that made my blood run cold. It was a stack of old credit card statements for a card I kept for emergencies, one that I had added Carl to years ago. I rarely used it, but I kept it active. I idly flipped through the pages, and a charge from a year ago caught my eye. 3250.78, the Cypress Grove Spa and Resort. I remember that weekend with perfect, chilling clarity. Carl and Jody had told me they had to go on a last-minute, stressful work trip for his promotion. They had asked me to watch the kids for 3 days. I had canceled my annual trip to the state fair with Sarah to do it, a tradition we had for 20 years.
They hadn't just lied to me. They had used my emergency credit card to pay for their luxurious getaway while I was at home looking after their children. The betrayal was so deep, so casual, it stole my breath. Any lingering shred of doubt I had about my course of action evaporated in that moment. This wasn't just about a cruel comment at a party. This was a pattern of disrespect and exploitation that had been going on for years. The final brick in my fortress was the most symbolic. I called a 24-hour locksmith and had every single lock on my house changed. The deadbolt on the front door, the knob on the back door, even the little lock on the cellar. The handyman, a cheerful man named Mark, whistled as he worked. "Getting some new security, huh?" he asked. "Good idea in this day and age." "Something like that," I said. "Just time for a change." As he was packing up his tools, I wrote him a check and watched him drive away. I stood in my doorway, holding a set of new, shiny keys in my palm. They felt heavy and powerful. For the first time since Frank died, I felt completely safe in my own home. I knew it wouldn't last. The certified letter was in the mail.
The joint account was nearly empty. The old keys in their hands were now useless pieces of metal. The silent war was about to get very, very loud. I braced myself for the incoming storm. The first tremor occurred 3 days after I changed the locks. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was in my garden, humming to myself as I pruned my prize-winning rose bushes, when my phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number, but I had a sinking feeling I knew who it was. My old landline, the one Carl and Jody always called, sat silent inside the house. I had started giving my new cell number only to people I trusted, like Sarah and Lena. "Hello?" I answered, my voice deliberately calm. "Mom? Why are you answering a weird number?" It was Carl. His voice was tight with irritation. "I've been calling the house for an hour. It just rings and rings." "I was in the garden, dear," I said, snipping a dead rose head with the satisfying crunch. "I have a cell phone now. It's more convenient for me." "Whatever. Listen, I was just driving by and thought I'd drop off those tax documents for you to sign, but my key isn't working. Did you break it off in the lock or something? The whole thing feels stiff." There it was, the first test. I took a steadying breath, the scent of roses filling my lungs. "No, nothing's broken, Carl. I had the locks changed." Silence. A heavy, loaded silence. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head, the confusion warring with his innate sense of entitlement. "You what? Why on earth would you do that without telling me? I have a key for emergencies." "I just felt it was time for a security upgrade," I used the handyman's cheerful words. "From now on, if you'd like to visit, just give me a call first so I know you're coming. I'll be happy to let you in." "Give you a call? An appointment?" He scoffed. "Mom, it's our family home. I don't need an appointment to see my own mother." "It's my home, Carl," I said, my voice gentle but firm as granite. "And I would appreciate a call beforehand. It's the polite thing to do. I'll see you at Sunday dinner, dear." And I hung up before he could argue further. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, but I had held my ground. The real storm broke that weekend. The certified letter revoking the power of attorney had arrived. I knew because on Saturday morning, Jody's sleek black SUV screeched into my driveway. I watched through the lace curtains in the parlor as she marched up to the front door and tried her key. When it didn't work, she let out a frustrated sound I could hear even through the glass. She then marched around to the back of the house, probably assuming I'd forgotten that one. I heard the rattle of the knob, followed by an angry sigh. A moment later, my new cell phone buzzed. It was Jody. I let it go to voicemail. I wasn't ready to talk to her yet. I needed to be in control of the time and place for any confrontation. But Jody was not one to be ignored. She began her counterattack not with a direct assault, but with a campaign of insidious manipulation. The first move was a text message filled with a picture of a homemade pie. "Brought you your favorite apple crumble, Maybelle. Just wanted to drop it by. Are you okay? We're all so worried about you. Please call me back." Worried. That was their new strategy. Not anger, but concern. It was a classic tactic of gaslighting, designed to make me doubt myself and make anyone else I'd talk to think I was the problem. Later that day, Brenda from across the street called. She was a notorious gossip who was overly friendly with Jody. "Mabel, honey, is everything all right? Jody stopped by my place. She was just beside herself with worry. She said you wouldn't even open the door for her. She's afraid you might have had a fall." So the smear campaign had begun. I was no longer a person. I was a problem to be managed. The most painful attack came from Carl. He called me on Sunday evening, his voice heavy with a sorrow that I knew was completely fake. "Mom, I got a letter from some lawyer. I don't understand. Power of attorney? Mom, that was to protect you, to take care of you like Dad would have wanted." He brought up my dead husband. The low blow I had been expecting, but it still hurt more than I could have imagined. Frank and I made that decision together, Mom. He trusted me to look after you. Can you imagine how disappointed he would be right now, seeing you push me away like this, listening to strangers instead of your own son? After his funeral, I promised him I'd always be there for you. What's happened to you? I closed my eyes, gripping the phone tightly. This was the test Lena had warned me about, the emotional blackmail. He was using my love for Frank, my grief, against me. For a fleeting second, I wavered. The guilt was a physical thing, a heavy weight in my gut. Was I doing the right thing? Was I destroying my family? But then I remembered. I pictured Jody's face twisted in a sneer as she uttered those horrible words. I saw the spa resort charge on my credit card statement. I felt the sting of the young banker's condescending smile. My spine stiffened. Frank would be disappointed that his son stood by while his wife wished me dead. The line went completely silent. I had never spoken to Carl like that in his entire life. What? What are you talking about? Jody would never say something like that. You must have misheard. You've been a bit forgetful lately, Mom. My memory is crystal clear, Carl. I was behind the lilac bush. At your party, I heard everything. Every single word.
I didn't wait for a response. I hung up the phone. I had revealed a piece of my ammunition, something I hadn't planned on, but it was worth it to stop his manipulative monologue in its tracks. The house felt like a fortress under siege. They were attacking from all sides, using guilt, gossip, and fake concern as their weapons. They were trying to break me down, to make me feel so lonely and confused that I would open the gates and let them back in just to make it stop. I sat at Frank's desk, the silence of the house pressing in on me. I felt the first real flicker of doubt. Maybe I couldn't do this alone. It was one thing to sign papers in a lawyer's office. It was another thing to withstand a full-blown psychological assault from your own family. The loneliness was overwhelming. My resolve was being tested, and for the first time, I was afraid it might crack. The days following that phone call with Carl were some of the longest of my life. The siege continued. I stopped answering the landline altogether, letting the machine pick up increasingly frantic messages from concerned relatives who had been fed Jody's narrative of my supposed decline. Each message was a small prick, a reminder that my reputation was being systematically dismantled by a woman I had once welcomed as a daughter. I felt isolated, adrift in a sea of my own making. My only lifelines were Sarah and Lena. Sarah would call every morning, just to chat about her garden or a new book she was reading, a comforting slice of normalcy in the midst of the chaos. "Don't you let them get to you, Mabel," she'd say fiercely. "You're doing what you should have done years ago." Lena was my general. We had weekly strategy calls where I would report the enemy's movements and she would advise me on how to hold the line. "They're trying to create a narrative, Mabel," she told me, her voice crisp and professional. "Our job is to create a stronger one based on facts and the law." But facts and the law felt very far away in the dead of night when the doubts crept in. I was alone. That was the simple, painful truth of it. And they were a family. They had each other. That's why when my cell phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number one afternoon, my first instinct was to ignore it. It was probably another one of them trying a new tactic. But something made me look. "Grandma, it's Ruby. Can I please see you? Alone? I won't tell Mom and Dad." My breath caught in my throat. Ruby? My granddaughter? Of all the scenarios I had imagined, this was not one of them. My immediate reaction was suspicion. Was this a trick?
Was Jody putting her up to this? Sending her in as a Trojan horse to appeal to my grandmotherly affections? The thought was so cynical, it made me sick to my stomach. But after the last few weeks, I couldn't dismiss it. I texted back a simple, non-committal reply. "What about?" The response came instantly. "I need to apologize. Please. I can meet you at the library, after school tomorrow." The library. Neutral ground. A public place. It was a smart suggestion, which made me both more and less suspicious. After a long moment, I agreed. We met the next afternoon in a quiet corner of the local library, surrounded by the comforting smell of old paper and wood polish. Ruby looked smaller than I remembered, her usual teenage confidence gone. She sat twisting her hands in her lap, refusing to meet my eyes. I sat and waited, letting the silence stretch. "Thank you for coming, Grandma," she mumbled to the table. "All right, Ruby," I said, my voice softer than I intended. "What is this about?" She finally looked up, and I was shocked to see her eyes were filled with tears. "I heard you," she whispered, her voice choked. "At the party. I was on the other side of the sliding door, in the kitchen, getting a drink. I heard what Mom said, and I heard you come in right after, with the cobbler, acting like nothing was wrong." A tear spilled over and ran down her cheek. "I didn't say anything. I just sat there and let her be horrible to you. I've been letting her be horrible to you my whole life. The way she talks about you when you're not around. She mocks your clothes, your cooking, and Dad just lets her. And Trent and I, we just go along with it. It's easier." She was crying openly now, big, gulping sobs. A librarian from the front desk gave us a disapproving look. "But then I heard them talking the other night," she continued, lowering her voice to a desperate whisper. "After Dad got that letter, they weren't just mad, Grandma. They were planning. They were looking up lawyers who specialize in elder care cases. Mom said they could prove you were a danger to yourself because you weren't managing your own salary and pension properly. She said they had a duty to take control." I stared at her, my heart aching. This was no act. This was the raw, painful confession of a child whose conscience had finally won a battle against her upbringing. I reached across the table and placed my hand over her trembling ones. "Oh, Ruby," was all I could manage to say. We sat in silence for a while, just the two of us in that quiet corner of the world. She told me more, about how Jody would take the checks I gave her for birthdays and Christmas and spend them on herself, about how Carl's main concern wasn't my well-being, but whether the changes I was making would affect their ability to get a loan for a new boat. "She's obsessed with the inheritance, Grandma," she said, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "It's all she talks about, how the house will be theirs one day, how they'll sell it and be set for life. She's already picked out the new kitchen she wants to install." Hearing it laid bare like that from the mouth of my own granddaughter was sickening, but it was also a validation. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. The threat was real. "What do you want to do, Ruby?" I asked her gently. "I want to be on your side," she said, her voice firming with new resolve. "I can't be like them. I don't want to be. I can tell you what they're planning. I can be your spy." I almost smiled. A spy. It was such a dramatic, teenage way of putting it. But I shook my head. "No, sweetheart. I don't want you to lie for me. I don't want you caught in the middle of a custody battle or anything like that if your parents split up. I don't want this to be any harder on you than it already is. All I want from you is what you've given me today, the truth. I made a decision right then and there. But you can help me in another way," I said. "I'm going to be selling the house soon. There are 50 years of memories packed into that place. I can't sort through all of them on my own.
Would you help me go through old photo albums? Help me decide what to keep.
Her face lit up with a genuine, beautiful smile. Really? I'd love that, Grandma. It was more than just a request for help. It was an invitation, an offer of a relationship based not on obligation or future financial gain, but on a shared history and a chance for a new beginning. I left the library that day with a new weapon in my arsenal, one far more powerful than lawyers or legal documents. I had an ally. And for the first time in a long time, I had hope. The siege inside my mind had been broken. With Ruby on my side, the dynamic of the war shifted. It was no longer just me against them. The information she provided, without my even asking for it, was invaluable. She'd text me after overhearing a snippet of a phone call or a hushed conversation between her parents. Mom's talking to a lawyer named Mr. Finch. He specializes in elder fraud, one text read. Another said, Dad is trying to pull his old credit reports to see if you co-signed anything else for him. They were scrambling, trying to find a weakness in my defenses. Jody's strategy was to prove I was mentally unfit, while Carl's was to see how deep his financial entanglements went. Knowing their tactics allowed Lena, Mr. Davies, and me to stay one step ahead. Mr. Davies arranged for me to have a full competency evaluation with a respected geriatric psychiatrist. It felt deeply humiliating to have to prove my own sanity, but he insisted it was a necessary preemptive strike. When they file their petition to the court, he explained, his voice calm and reassuring, we will walk in with a recent, thorough, and impeccable evaluation from a top expert. It will cut the legs out from under their entire argument before it can even stand. The evaluation was long and exhausting, held in a sterile office that smelled of antiseptic. The psychiatrist, a kind woman named Dr. Evans, asked me a battery of questions, from complex financial scenarios to details about my personal history. I told her everything, my voice clear and steady. She listened with an empathetic ear, and by the end, she smiled warmly. Her official report noted that I was remarkably sharp and decisive, with a clear understanding of her personal and financial affairs. Another brick in the fortress. Meanwhile, Ruby and I began our project of dismantling the past. Every Tuesday and Thursday after school, she would come over. We started in the attic, a place I hadn't ventured into for years. It was dusty and filled with ghosts. We unsealed boxes and were hit with the scent of old paper and cedar. We found my wedding dress, yellowed with age, but still beautiful in its lace box. We found Carl's old report cards. He was never a great student. And his childhood drawings of superheroes with lopsided muscles. And we found the photo albums, dozens of them, with thick black pages and photos held in place by little paper corners. A chronicle of a life, a family. Looking at those pictures with Ruby was bittersweet. There were so many happy memories. Christmases with mountains of presents under the tree, birthdays with messy, homemade cakes, vacations to the lake, all of us sunburnt and smiling. In the photos, we looked like the perfect family. Carl, a smiling boy on his father's shoulders. Jody, a young bride, looking at my son with what seemed like real love. It was hard to reconcile those images with the people they had become. You guys seemed so happy, Ruby said quietly, tracing a finger over a photo of her parents holding her as a baby. We were, honey, I said, my voice soft. Or, I thought we were. People change. Money changes them. I told her stories about the photos, about the grandfather she barely remembered. I told her about Frank's terrible jokes, his passion for fishing, the way he could fix anything with a bit of duct tape and sheer willpower. I was giving her a piece of her history that her parents had neglected to share. We were building a bridge between her future and my past. One afternoon, we found a box of Frank's old things.
In it was a small velvet box containing a pair of his favorite cufflinks. I had been so sure they had borrowed and lost them along with his watch. The realization that I had been wrong about that one thing, that my anger had clouded my memory, was a humbling moment. It reminded me to stick to the verifiable truths, just as Lena had advised. The verifiable truths were damning enough. I didn't need to invent others. The final pieces of my legal and financial plan were falling into place. The house was officially in the irrevocable trust. My new will was signed, witnessed, and notarized. All my assets were secure in accounts that only I controlled. I was ready. The fortress was built, the ammunition was stockpiled, and the enemy was getting desperate. Ruby told me they were planning something big. They want a family meeting, she texted me one night, her message filled with worried emojis. Mom's practicing what she's going to say. She wants to do it at your house to make you feel comfortable. To make me feel cornered, she meant. Lena and I saw the opportunity immediately. They wanted a showdown. We would give them one, but it would be on my terms, on my turf. We accept the meeting, Lena said over the phone, her voice crisp. You will be gracious. You will offer them tea. You will let them walk into the parlor and say their piece. Mr. Davies and I will be there with you. They'll see it as an ambush, I said, a little nervously. Exactly, Lena replied, a hint of satisfaction in her voice. They are planning an ambush of their own. We're simply bringing bigger guns. So I called Carl. I pitched my voice to sound tired, a little frail, like a woman ready to wave the white flag. Carl, dear, I said softly, Ruby mentioned you and Jody wanted to talk. I think that's a good idea. There has been too much unpleasantness. Why don't you come over this Saturday? We can sort all of this out. He readily agreed, his voice full of false sympathy and a barely concealed triumph. Of course, Mom. We're glad you're coming to your senses. We just want what's best for you. I knew what was coming. They would come armed with their lawyers' talking points, with accusations of my senility, with emotional appeals and veiled threats. They thought they were walking into a defenseless cottage. They had no idea they were walking into the kill zone of a carefully prepared battlefield. The stage was set. Saturday arrived, a gray and overcast day that perfectly matched my mood. There was no joy in what I was about to do, only a grim sense of necessity. Lena and Mr. Davies arrived an hour early. Lena was dressed in a sharp, dark gray suit, the color of a storm cloud. Mr. Davies looked more like a kindly professor in his tweed jacket, but his briefcase, sitting squarely on the floor beside him, held all the power we needed. We sat in the living room, the room I'd always called the parlor. It was filled with memories, dominated by the stone fireplace Frank had built with his own 2 hands. I had prepared a tray with my best china tea set, a plate of lemon shortbread cookies, and 3 extra cups. The simple domestic act of preparing for guests was a strange contrast to the legal battle we were about to wage.
Are you ready, Mabel? Mr. Davies asked gently, placing his hand briefly on my arm. I took a deep breath and nodded. I am. Right on time, at 2 o'clock, Carl's oversized SUV pulled into the driveway. He and Jody walked up the path, their faces arranged in masks of solemn concern. Jody was carrying a bouquet of cheap grocery store carnations, a prop for her performance. I opened the door before they could knock. Carl, Jody, come in. They stepped inside, their eyes sweeping the room, no doubt looking for signs of disarray to support their narrative of my decline. When they saw Lena and Mr. Davies sitting by the fireplace, they froze. Jody's practiced smile faltered for a fraction of a second, and Carl's face went pale. Mom, who are these people? Carl asked, his voice immediately defensive. This is Lena Petrova, my financial advisor, and this is my attorney, Arthur Davies, I said calmly. They're here to help facilitate our discussion. Please, sit down. Would you like some tea? The offer of tea seemed to throw them off balance.
They had come expecting a confrontation with a confused old woman, not a boardroom meeting. They sat stiffly on the sofa opposite us, refusing my offer of refreshments. Jody placed the carnations on the coffee table like a wreath on a grave. Carl cleared his throat, trying to regain control. Mom, with all due respect, this is a private family matter. We don't need lawyers here. I'm afraid I disagree, Carl, Mr. Davies said, his voice mild but firm. Given the letter you received regarding the revocation of your power of attorney and the subsequent inquiries your wife has been making about Mrs. Hemsworth's mental state, I believe my presence is not only appropriate, but necessary. Jody shot him a look of pure venom before turning her attention to me. Her voice was syrupy, sweet. Mabel, we're just worried. That's all this is. You're not acting like yourself. Changing the locks, not answering the phone. We're scared you're being taken advantage of. This woman, she said, gesturing contemptuously at Lena. Who is she? How do we know she has your best interests at heart? You've always been so trusting. Lena has been invaluable to me, I said, my voice steady. We think you need more help than an advisor, Carl jumped in, finding his footing. We've been talking. We think it's time we stepped in to manage your affairs more formally, for your own good, to protect you, to protect Dad's legacy, and the family's assets. There it was. The family's assets, not my assets. And what exactly do you propose? I asked, keeping my gaze locked on his. Jody answered, We've spoken to our own lawyer. He's suggested a conservatorship. It's a legal arrangement where a judge appoints someone, in this case Carl, to manage your finances and personal care because you're no longer able to do so yourself. It would simplify everything. Simplify. That word again. The same word she had whispered behind the lilac bush. My death would simplify things. Taking legal control of my life would simplify things. The sheer breathtaking arrogance of it was stunning. I let the silence hang in the air for a long moment. I looked at my son, the baby I had held in my arms, and his wife, the woman I had welcomed into my home. I saw nothing in their eyes but greed. I said, no. Mom, you don't understand, Carl started. No, Carl, you don't understand, I interrupted, my voice gaining strength. This is not a negotiation. This is a notification. I nodded to Mr. Davies. He opened his briefcase and took out a slim file folder. Let's address your concerns one by one, shall we? First, regarding Mrs. Hemsworth's mental competency. He slid a bound document across the coffee table. This is a full psychiatric evaluation conducted last week by Dr. Angeli Evans, head of geriatrics at University Hospital. Her conclusion, and I quote, is that Mrs. Hemsworth is of exceptionally sound mind, demonstrating astute judgment and clear long-term reasoning. Your petition for a conservatorship, should you choose to file one, would be dismissed before you even finish your opening statement. Jody's face turned ashen. Carl just stared at the document as if it were a snake. Second, Mr. Davies continued, regarding the family assets. As of 3 weeks ago, your power of attorney was legally revoked. As of 2 weeks ago, your name, Mr. Hemsworth, was removed from all Mrs. Hemsworth's bank accounts, and her funds were transferred to a new institution. Her new will has been drafted and notarized, establishing educational trusts for your children to be managed by an independent trustee. He paused, letting the information sink in. Carl looked like he'd been punched in the stomach. Jody, however, recovered quickly. Her eyes narrowed. The house. This house is still in her name. It's worth a fortune. That's our inheritance. You can't take that away." I decided it was my turn to speak. I leaned forward, my hands clasped calmly in my lap. "You've always loved this house, haven't you, Jody? You've talked many times about the renovations you'd make after I was gone." "This house belongs in the family," she shot back, her mask of concern now completely gone, revealing the raw avarice beneath. "You're right. It does. It belongs to a family, which is why, as of last Monday, this house and the property it sits on were transferred into an irrevocable trust." "What does that mean?" Carl asked, his voice a hoarse whisper. "It means," I said, looking him straight in the eye, "that I no longer own it. I have the right to live here for the rest of my life, but upon my death, the house will be sold and the entire proceeds will go to the named beneficiary of the trust." Jody let out a short, sharp laugh of disbelief. "And who's that? This advisor?" she sneered, pointing at Lena. I let the question hang in the air, savoring the last moment before the final, killing blow. "No," I said, my voice dropping to an almost whisper, forcing them to lean in. "The beneficiary is the Elm Street Haven for Women and Children." I watched their faces for a reaction. Nothing. They didn't understand. So I told them. "It's a shelter for women who have nowhere else to go. They gave me a bed and a hot meal for a week, long before you were born, Carl. Back when your father and I had lost everything and were living out of our car. This house, this legacy you were so eager to claim, was built on the foundation of kindness from strangers. It is going back to them. It is going home." That was it. The final, devastating truth. The room was utterly silent, save for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. In that moment, I saw them for what they truly were. Not my family, just two greedy strangers who had been sitting in my living room all along. The silence that followed my revelation was heavier than any shouting match could ever be. It was the silence of utter, absolute defeat. Jody's face, which had been a mask of rage, seemed to crumble. Her features sagged, the avarice in her eyes replaced by a look of hollow disbelief. Her knuckles were white, where she gripped the strap of her expensive handbag. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, no words coming out.
Carl was the one who broke. He didn't get angry. He just deflated, slumping back against the sofa cushions as if his bones had turned to dust. He looked at me, and for the first time, I didn't see an entitled man. I saw the little boy he used to be, lost and confused, the one who used to run to me when he scraped his knee. "Why, Mom?" he whispered, his voice cracking. "Why would you do this to us?" The question, so breathtakingly selfish, so utterly devoid of self-awareness, snapped me out of my momentary pity. "To you?" I replied, my voice cold and clear as ice. "You are asking me why I did this to you. Carl, I did this for me. For my peace, for my dignity, for the memory of your father, which you both have spent years tarnishing with your greed. You stood by in your own backyard and let your wife wonder aloud why I was still breathing. Did you think I wouldn't hear? Or did you just not care? Which is worse?" Carl flinched as if I had slapped him. He had no answer. He just shook his head, looking down at his hands as if he'd never seen them before. Mr. Davies stood up, a signal that the meeting was over. "I believe we're concluded here," he said in his calm, authoritative voice. "I'll show you out." Jody seemed to snap back to life. She shot to her feet, her eyes blazing with a new kind of fire. Pure, unadulterated hatred. "You will regret this, you old witch,"
She spat at me. She grabbed her purse and stormed out of the room, slamming the front door so hard that a picture on the wall rattled in its frame. Carl remained seated for a moment longer. He looked around the room, at the fireplace, at the pictures on the mantel, as if seeing it all for the first time and the last. He slowly got to his feet and walked to the door, not looking at me. He paused on the threshold. "I'm sorry," he mumbled so quietly I could barely hear him. But I knew the apology wasn't for the years of neglect or for his wife's cruelty. It was an apology for getting caught, an apology for losing. He walked out and closed the door softly behind him. The three of us, me, Lena, and Mr. Davies, stood in the quiet room. The tension slowly seeped out, leaving behind a profound exhaustion. "Well," Lena said, breaking the silence, "that went about as well as could be expected." I managed a weak smile. "Thank you," I said to both of you, my voice trembling slightly now that the adrenaline was gone. "You did the hard part, Mabel. You found the strength to fight back," Mr. Davies said, packing his briefcase. After they left, I was alone in my fortress. But this time, the silence didn't feel lonely. It felt peaceful. I walked over to the coffee table and picked up the tacky bouquet of carnations Jody had brought. I dropped them directly into the trash can. The weeks that followed were quiet. They didn't call. They didn't text. It was as if I had ceased to exist for them, which, I suppose, was what they had wanted all along, just not in this way. Ruby continued to visit, and our bond grew stronger. She was my bridge to the future, a testament that the family line wasn't entirely corrupted. 1 month after the showdown, Carl came to see me. He came alone on a weekday afternoon and rang the new doorbell. I saw him through the peephole looking tired and older than his 45 years. I hesitated for a moment, then opened the door. We sat in the kitchen, not the formal parlor. He didn't look at me at first, just stared into the cup of coffee I placed in front of him. "He left me," he said finally. I wasn't surprised. Her loyalty was to his inheritance, not to him. Once the inheritance was gone, there was nothing left to hold her there. I learned later she had been having an affair for some time, likely with the boss she was so keen to impress at the party. The collapse of her financial expectations was the final straw. They were in the middle of a nasty divorce. "She's going after everything," he said, his voice bitter. "Her lawyer is a shark. She wants the house, the car, half my salary." He let out a humorless laugh. "It's funny. All those years, she complained about you. But the money you gave us, the house you helped us buy, that's what kept me with her. I was just a means to an end." He finally looked at me, his eyes pleading. "I messed up, Mom. I know I did. I was weak. I let her walk all over me, and I let her walk all over you. I was a coward. Can we fix this?" I looked at my son. The damage of 45 years of indulgence and moral cowardice was etched on his face. I knew that taking him back into my life, into my finances, would mean an endless cycle of the same behavior. I loved him, but I had learned a hard lesson. Some things, once broken, cannot be perfectly mended, and some things shouldn't be. "I will always be your mother," I said, my voice gentle but firm. "I will always love you, but I cannot go back to the way things were. I am selling this house and moving on with my life. The door to my new life will always be open to you, as my son, but you have to walk through it on your own 2 feet. You have to fix yourself first." It wasn't the absolution he wanted, it was a boundary. It was the beginning of a new, healthier relationship, one where my love was no longer a resource to be plundered. He finished his coffee in silence, and when he left, I felt a sense of closure. I had not just reclaimed my life, I had given my son a chance to reclaim his own. The decision to sell the house, once made, felt like the final, liberating step. It was no longer a fortress to be defended, but a vessel of memories that it was time to let go. With Ruby's help, I spent the next 2 months sorting through 50 years of life. It was a bittersweet process. an archaeology of my own heart. Each object told a story. Frank's old armchair with the worn spot on the right arm where he used to rest his hand, the pencil marks on the kitchen door frame charting Carl's growth from a toddler to a teenager who was suddenly taller than me. We packed what was precious: the photos, Frank's favorite fishing rod, my mother's china, and we held a large estate sale for the rest. It was strangely freeing to watch strangers cart away the heavy furniture that had weighed me down for so long. The house sold quickly, the market was good, and it was a solid, well-loved home. The day I signed the closing papers, I asked Mr. Davies to be there. We arranged for the entire sum to be transferred directly from the sale into the irrevocable trust for the Elm Street Haven. I never even saw the check. It wasn't my money anymore. It was my legacy.
I found a lovely 2-bedroom apartment in a vibrant senior living community a few states away, down in Florida where the sun always shines. The idea of no more lawns to mow or gutters to clean was heavenly. It was bright and modern, with a screened-in balcony that overlooked a small lake dotted with water lilies. Moving day was a whirlwind. Sarah flew down to help me get settled. Ruby came too, spending a week of her summer vacation helping me unpack and arrange furniture. She was a godsend, full of youthful energy and an eye for design I never knew she had. She insisted on hanging a gallery of old family photos in the hallway, creating a bridge between my past and my present. "You need to remember the good times too, Grandma," she said wisely. My new life began to take shape. It was quieter than my old life, but it was a peaceful quiet, not a lonely one. I joined a water aerobics class, much to my own surprise, and found I loved the feeling of weightlessness in the water. I also joined a book club where the debates over plot points were fierce and fascinating. I made new friends, women like me, with stories of their own, with lives fully lived. There was Carol, a retired teacher with a wicked sense of humor and a stash of forbidden chocolate she'd share after our aerobics class. And there was Linda, a widow who had traveled the world and had 1,000 tales to tell. We'd sit on my balcony in the evenings, drinking iced tea and watching the sunset paint the lake in shades of orange and pink, sharing stories and laughter. For the first time in a very long time, I felt seen. These new friends didn't know me as Carl's mother or Ruby's grandmother. They just knew me as Mabel. They valued my opinions, laughed at my jokes, and listened to my stories. My presence wasn't an inconvenience. It was a welcome addition to their circle. One afternoon, I was in the kitchen of my new apartment, the sun streaming in, a warm breeze blowing through the open balcony door. Ruby was visiting for the weekend. I was teaching her how to make my peach cobbler. "You have to make sure you don't over-mix the batter," I explained, guiding her hands. "That's the secret to a tender crust. Your grandpa always said my crust was lighter than air." She was natural, her movements quick and confident. As we worked, the familiar sweet smell of peaches and cinnamon filled the small kitchen. It was the same smell from that awful day at the barbecue, but it felt different now. It was no longer tainted by bitterness and betrayal. It was just the smell of home, of love, of something good being passed down from one generation to the next. While the cobbler was baking, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but I did. It was a woman named Eleanor, the director of the Elm Street Haven. "Mrs. Hemsworth? Mabel?" she said, her voice filled with an emotion I couldn't quite place. I don't even know what to say. "We received the notification from the trust, the final amount. We're speechless." She told me what the donation would mean for them. They could not only renovate their aging building, but also expand their services, adding a new wing for job training and childcare. They could help hundreds more women get back on their feet, just as they had helped me all those years ago. She told me a story about a young mother with 2 children who had just arrived the night before with nothing but the clothes on her back. "Because of you, Mabel," Eleanor said, "we can promise her a future." "You have no idea what you've done, Mabel," she said, her voice thick with tears. After I hung up the phone, I stood looking out at the shimmering lake. A legacy of hope. Jody and Carl had been obsessed with their inheritance, a legacy of money. But this was different. This was a legacy of kindness, of second chances.
It was a foundation not built of bricks and mortar, but of compassion. The timer buzzed, and Ruby pulled the bubbling golden brown cobbler from the oven. "It looks perfect, Grandma," she said, beaming. And it was. Everything was. My 73rd birthday was a few weeks later. In previous years, my birthday had become a source of quiet dread. It usually meant a perfunctory dinner at a noisy restaurant chosen by Jody, a generic gift I didn't need, like another scented candle, and the overwhelming feeling of being an obligation they had to fulfill. This year was different. I decided I wanted to host a small party in my new apartment. Not a big affair, just a gathering of the people who now formed the fabric of my new life. The guest list was small but precious. Sarah flew down again, insisting she wouldn't miss it for the world. My new friends, Carol and Linda, came bearing a ridiculously large bunch of balloons that kept bumping into the ceiling fan. And Lena and Mr. Davies sent a beautiful orchid with a card that read, "To our favorite client, happy victories and new beginnings." And of course there was Ruby. She arrived with a framed photo she had taken of me on my balcony, laughing into the sunlight. It was the most beautiful picture of myself I had ever seen. I looked genuinely happy. There was no sign of Carl. We had spoken a few times on the phone. The conversations were still a bit stilted, but he was trying. He was in therapy, he told me. He was trying to figure out who he was, without Jody and without my financial safety net. He had wished me a happy birthday over the phone that morning. It was a small step, but it was a step in the right direction. I had told him, as always, that the door was open. My little apartment was filled with laughter and cheerful conversation. We didn't talk about the past, about the battles fought and won. We talked about books and travel, about our children and grandchildren, about the funny thing that happened at water aerobics that week. It was normal. It was easy. It was wonderful. Ruby, the youngest in the room by several decades, was the life of the party. She charmed my friends, listened intently to their stories, and helped me serve the food. I watched her, so full of grace and intelligence, and felt a profound sense of peace. The future of my family, the best parts of it anyway, was in good hands. Lena and Sarah cornered her at one point, and I saw them all laughing, these three women from different generations who had, in their own ways, been my saviors. For dessert, Ruby and I brought out the peach cobbler we had made together. As I served it, I caught Sarah's eye across the room. She knew the significance of this particular dessert. She gave me a small, knowing smile and a slight nod, a silent acknowledgement of how far I had come. From a ghost serving cobbler at a party where I was unwanted, to the queen of my own celebration surrounded by people who cherished me. Later, as the sun began to set, casting long, golden rays across the lake, Carl raised his glass of sparkling cider.
"A toast," she said, her voice warm, "to our friend Mabel, a woman who reminds us all that it's never too late to start a new chapter, to find your voice, and to choose your own family." Everyone cheered and clinked glasses. In that moment, surrounded by warmth and genuine affection, I felt a wave of gratitude so powerful it almost brought me to tears. I had lost a son, in a way. I had lost the family I thought I had. But I had found something far more valuable. I had found myself. After everyone had left and Ruby had helped me with the dishes, I sat alone on my balcony. The air was cool, the sky was filled with stars, and the scent of night-blooming jasmine drifted up from below. I thought about the woman I was just a few short months ago, invisible, silenced, and heartbroken. I thought about her journey, her fear, and the core of steel she found within herself when she was pushed to the brink. My story isn't one of revenge. Revenge is a bitter, empty meal that poisons the person who serves it. This is a story about self-respect. It's about the quiet, powerful act of drawing a line in the sand and saying, "No more." It's about understanding that your value as a person is not determined by how useful you are to others, how much you can give, or how silently you can endure. Your worth is inherent. It is absolute. I had to burn down my old life to rise from the ashes. I had to lose a family to find a true one. And I had to give away a house to finally, truly, come home.
thank you for listening to my story. It means more than you know. For anyone out there who has ever felt taken for granted, who has ever felt their sacrifices were invisible, please know this. You are stronger than you think. Your voice matters, and your happy ending is still waiting for you to write it.